Today's another fun episode on What No One Tells You. And in case you're new here, I'm Chris.
I'm Sara.
And currently we're sitting in Baja, Mexico still, looking at the ocean, using Starlink to interview guests for this amazing podcast. It's kind of surreal, actually.
Life is hard.
Life is hard, yeah.
So today's guest's name is Paulina, and Paulina is an avid adventurer. She is from the West, but what's really cool about her story is that she got into outdoors and adventures later in life, which is really cool because I know how intimidating that can be. Neither one of us grew up in super outdoorsy families, so learning new skills like hiking and camping and backpacking and cycling, that was very new for us later in life. And we love that she is pioneering and encouraging other people to get out there later in life. Two, she is bringing diversity to the outdoors. So she is a Vietnamese American, and she is advocating for getting more people who look more like her out in the outdoors. It's everybody's outdoor playground. So she does a really cool job of bringing along anybody and everybody.
And also, I really like her domain name, littlegrunts.com. I really like that website.
She has such a sense of humor about how we've talked about this probably, but how some people in the outdoor industry, it could be so intimidating because they're almost pretentious or know-it-all, or just like it's a very intimidating culture sometimes, but people like her do a really good job of humanizing it and making it seem accessible to all. And I really love that she brings a sense of humor to it. So
you're going to love this conversation. But before we jump in, please, for the love of all, go to iTunes, leave a review. I mean, that would just be amazing. Sara loves this part of the episode. She just loves asking for people's help. Blah, 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 all that stuff. So it helps creators like us continue to do what we do. So go to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this. And if you could leave a review, a thumbs up, that would be amazing.
I wish we could see the analytics of how many people just skip over that section of the podcast every time we're like, here comes Chris's spill.
Yeah. And guess what? You're going to skip 15 seconds, and I'm still talking about it. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into this conversation.
Paulina, thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to talk to you about cycling and climbing and everything that you do. So could you just go ahead and give people an idea of who you are, where you're from, what you do? I know it's a loaded question, but just tell us what we should know.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Paulina, and I am based in Sacramento, California. I grew up in the Bay Area, and then the Bay Area got way too expensive for me to live in, so I moved out here. Really never thought I would see myself living here because it was always a place you drove to on your way to go to the mountains. But now that I'm here, I'm like, this place is amazing. And my parents are always just like, why don't you come visit us more? I'm like, well, it's actually faster for me to go to Tahoe than it is to come to you. So I'm going to go that way instead. It's such a great place to be for like all the things I love doing. So recently really got into cycling, and I do a lot of climbing and backpacking as well. And then for like non-outdoor hobbies, I'm like, I really like reading and gardening.
Yes.
Were you always in the outdoors?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah. Did you grow up in an outdoor family, or what's that look like?
Not really. I mostly got into the outdoors after college, when I had a little bit of money to join like a climbing gym. And at the climbing gym, I made a bunch of friends that way who were like, oh, let's go like camping and hiking and all that stuff. My parents did send me to a summer camp when I was younger. I was a little bit too old to keep going to summer camp, but I loved it so much that I kept going back and volunteering my time there. So I would volunteer like 3 weeks of every summer, just like hanging out with kids. And it was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So like you're hiking and hanging out in the redwoods, and like playing tag and looking at banana slugs every single day.
Oh, cool. So that was about your only experience in the outdoors prior to post-college?
Yeah,
it's just
pretty much.
Summer camp.
Yeah, summer camp.
Wow. Okay.
And then I think we did maybe like a camping trip here and there, like, you know, we did like the touristy Yosemite thing, but it was never like, oh, like this is an outdoorsy thing. Like we are like outdoorsy people. It's just like, oh, these are like things that people do who live in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's very
yeah, and my
California.
parents, didn't really grow up outdoorsy. You know, they both immigrated here, and there are people who are just like, "What do you do on the weekends?" Like, we like immigrated here to give you a good life, and you are choosing to go like be dirty and not shower and sleep in the dirt all the time. Like, like I ended a long term relationship last year, and my mom was like, "Oh, let me help you date." I'm gonna give you all of this advice so that way you can keep a man. And I'm like, okay, like cool, whatever. Like, not really my priority, but like let's hear what you have to say. And she like listed off a bunch of things, and then she was just like, "Oh, you need to shower more." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, mom." Like, I'll
It comes
keep
from a
it.
good
Yeah, like I
place.
guess I'll keep that up. She's like, you need to shower more. You need to shave your armpits. You need to like wear deodorant. And I'm just like, you know what? Like if somebody that I am dating is making like a very big deal out of these things, like our lifestyles already aren't compatible. But thanks for the advice, I guess.
She just loves you. She means well.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying.
So, like, at what point did it cross that line for you of, all right, like, you're not so outdoorsy, you're not, like, you're growing up normal Californian life, I mean, whatever, and so, and now all of a sudden, like, you're out, you're out hiking, you're not showering for weeks and weeks, like, like, how did that, like, where did that line happen for you?
I mean, not gonna lie, I think when I was in middle school and high school, I already was not a big fan of like showering every day. Just because, I'm just going to school, like if I'm not getting sweaty or whatever, it's just like, oh, like why do I have to take a shower? This is like 30 to 45 minutes of my day that I could get back. But I think it was really like once I started going camping more. It was just one of those things where you're like, oh, like I don't have access to a shower, or a shower is expensive. It's like 25 cents for like a minute of hot water. I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend like $5 trying to shower when I can just go home in a couple of days and shower.
That's hey, I get you on that. I am so, like,
we lived in a van for a long time.
I hate that. I hate putting quarters in those shower machines. I'm like, I feel like I'm wasting money right now. This is a human right that they should give me. I want water. Yeah, I just
go jump in a lake.
Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
so.
Or and then I get like anxious. I'm just like, how much time do I have left? Like, do I want to be like mid shampoo and then I like ran out of quarters and suddenly I'm just like, okay, I guess this is done.
It's worse than it was before with the dry shampoo in your hair. Yeah, I get it. So I want to talk about like your entry into the outdoors a little bit more, just because I feel like we kind of grew up the same way, where we had families who, we went hiking every now and then. We did a couple of camp trips. We didn't do backpacking or climbing or anything like that. We were very East Coasters. But I think like we started getting into stuff more like hiking and cycling and that kind of stuff in college and afterwards. But it's intimidating getting into that. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, like, I wasn't the most athletically inclined. It's a very intimidating. A lot of these people, like, we lived in the East Coast and then we moved to Seattle. And, like, Seattle, it's like a birthright to buy your first backpack. It's like everybody just grows up in the outdoors and it's intimidating getting into it. So do you have any advice or experience that you could share with people about maybe they want to get into this, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, I feel like I've been a perpetual beginner the last couple of years, especially with cycling. I did like, cycling stuff, and then I started doing a little bit of backcountry split boarding. And there's like a couple different routes that you could go. The first one is finding just like group activities in your area. For me, for cycling, there's a company called Squid Bikes, and they are actually like located in my neighborhood. And I found out that they have weekly rides, like every Monday, like same place, same time, same route, like clockwork. And so I started kind of just showing up last summer. It definitely takes some courage to show up by yourself. So it is very scary to show up in like a new space where you don't know anyone.
Yes.
So it's like one of those things where you kind of have to like put yourself out there a little bit. I've also found luck with just reaching out to people that I admire on Instagram and, like kind of building a friendship to and then eventually like posing the question like, hey, like you do this really cool thing. Can I join you, or would you be open to introducing me to that sometime? And then,
And people have been pretty receptive.
yeah, people have been receptive for the most part, or, you know, they're like, oh, here are some other resources, or, you know, like other ways you can try to get into this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I'm also at a point where, you know, doing like beginner classes, like intro to backcountry skiing classes or intro to snowshoeing classes, either through like a local guide service or through REI, those are a great way to meet people and to learn new skills. And also, like, you know, for trying new things, sometimes you're like, I don't actually know if I will like this thing. So, you know, not having to pay like a bunch of money up front to try to start an activity and being able to borrow a bunch of gear before you decide to commit is slightly more cost effective.
For sure. How have the communities been? Have they been pretty welcoming? I mean, cycling, when you say cycling, you're doing more gravel cycling instead of road cycling, right?
I do. Yeah.
I feel like
just gravel and like cyclocross-ish stuff.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, that's super cool.
Very cool. I've always wanted to get into that. We've only ever done road cycling, but gravel cycling, like one of our favorite places in the world is Bend, Oregon, and everybody everybody does it there. And I want a gravel bike so badly. I'm sure we've talked about this in the show before, but the community seems pretty different in the gravel cycling world than like the road cycling world. Everybody just seems to do it for correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's for fun. Like people are doing it just to get outside and to hang out with friends. It doesn't seem to be super competitive. Like it just seems like a very welcoming environment. Is that true?
I think it depends on where you are and the situation you're in, for sure. For me, and I don't know, I think everyone has been telling me that the Sacramento cycling community is a very like niche and welcoming thing. So Sacramento's weird.
Okay.
It's a big city. It's like a little big city. So it's like a big city, but like not super big. And the cycling community is big, kind of like across the board, but also feels very small because everyone kind of knows everyone. So yeah, like showing up on my first ride, like I remember, like I have a screenshot of it. I like I like Googled, you know, what is this like Monday night like squid bikes ride, and I found, I don't know, a reel or a post about it, and I looked at it and I'm like, this looks scary. Like everyone seems very fast and this is scary. And I don't know if I'm welcome because, you know, like I only had a gravel bike for about 6 months and I had no idea what I was doing. And I left a comment on there saying like, hey, I'd like love to check this out, but am I welcome? You know, like everyone looks fast and scary. Like, will I be left behind? Like, so they, you know, the person who ran the Instagram responded and was like, hey, like, you know, everyone's welcome. We'll make sure you don't get left behind. And I showed up and it was the most terrifying thing. It was like, I knew literally nobody. And, you know, like maybe like 4 people talked to me like out of 20. And I was just like, I don't know what's happening here. But I also wanted to give it a good go before I decided to quit. So I like kind of kept coming back, and then people were like, oh, you're back again. I'm like, well, yeah, like, you know, like I'm trying this thing out. Like I have no idea what's happening, but yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Was there a certain time that it like, okay, she's a part of the group now? Like, you know, like what was it like after the 3rd or 4th attempt, or like how long did it take you to be them now?
I think probably not until October. So maybe like somewhere between like 5 to 10 rides. I know I was gone for like all of September last year. So that was kind of a big chunk missing. But, you know, like we're all like Strava friends and people were like, oh, like Paulina's in Italy. Like we can't wait for her to come back. And I also joined a cycling team club thing for a little bit because, you know, all the people that I like admired and wanted to be friends with were on this team. And so I was like, let me pay like $50 to like be their friend. And I would just kind of,
Is it worth it?
It was worth it. It was pretty worth it, I think. It was like a combo of making friends and like finding new places to ride and just like learning more about bikes. So that was really cool. The team eventually kind of got dissolved due to some issues, but you know, like all the people who I paid to be friends with, like are my actual friends now. Both a combination of like joining the team and like showing up to events with cookies.
I love it. You bribed your way in with some cookies.
Pretty much,
that would
like,
buy our friendship.
Yeah, I'm not against bribery at all. Yeah, and I think the moment that I really felt I was a part of the community was my first cyclocross race. It was it's called Nutty Cross, and it's like a very small like grassroots race, also put on by the same people who did Flannel Grinder, which I rode yesterday. And the cool thing is they are very community oriented. That race is very beginner friendly, so if you've never raced a cyclocross race before, your entry is free, which is really cool because, you know, like for me, I was just like, I don't want to pay $45-50 to realize that I absolutely hate this. So being able to try it was really fun. And that was also like right after my breakup, and like my ex moved out and stuff, and you know, like it was just like a really weird time. And my mom and my brother came to watch the race, and when they were there were just so many people. Once I started like racing, I say racing, it was really just like me riding in circles trying not to die in mud and rain. And you know, like every time I rode by like the spectators, there were just so many people cheering for me. And when I was done, my mom like made like me and some of my friends dinner, and she was like, wow, you have so many friends. There were so many people like cheering for you. Like we didn't even know that you knew all these people. Like where did they come from? And I'm like, I honestly don't know where they came from either. But this is really cool.
I love it.
That's amazing.
You found a group of people who probably doesn't like to shower too. So
Yeah,
you
that's what
found
I'm
your found your
Yeah,
group.
I mean,
Mom
I don't
understands
know.
now.
I don't know. I think they like showering. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, could you explain to people what cyclocross and gravel cycling is? Because I think we probably have people who aren't not familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does that look like? It's because it's like on a normal, like human powered bike. It's not like a motorcycle bike. So what does that look like? What is a race?
So gravel cycling is kind of pretty self-explanatory. It is basically like a cross between mountain biking and road biking. Or like, I guess some ways I've heard it described is a road bike with like bigger tires, bigger, beefier tires, with like different tread patterns. So that way you can ride off of the pavement and onto, you know, like fire roads or like dirt roads or like single track stuff like that. And cyclocross is a like gravel bike race, basically. I actually didn't know it was a thing until a few months ago. But you have your gravel bike, or like there's also like cyclocross specific bikes now with just slightly different geometry, similar tires to gravel bikes, and you are just riding in circles for like a short period of time. So there's like multiple categories from beginner to like pro, and the course is maybe like 1.5 miles to 2 miles long, and you're just like riding as many times in a circle and as fast as you can, with your friends or like with people you're competing with. And the course is generally like kind of technical. It really depends on, you know, who's putting on the race, but you are like either riding through sand or mud, like rocky things, and it's generally pretty flat, but there are like ups and downs, like little techie sections. So like some people do it on a mountain bike, a lot of people do it on gravel bikes. But either way, you're kind of like a little bit underbiked, and it's just really fun. I don't know. It's like a very weird type of miserable that I've decided I enjoy.
Hey, real quick, we just wanted to say thanks for listening to What No One Tells You, and we'd love for you to join our little community. So be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Okay, let's get back to the conversation.
It looks so fun to me. Like I didn't know what it was until a couple of years ago. I've never done one, but it kind of reminded me of like being a kid and getting to play in the mud. Like you get to like, I saw people like picking up their bikes and like they're being like, you know, ankle deep in mud, and it just looks so fun. Like a fun way to combine, you know, a passion for cycling and getting out there and getting kind of messy for a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it is a trip.
Yeah.
Are you a professional cyclist or hiker, or like what do you do for a living? Like are you outdoor, like is being outdoors your full-time thing and that's why you're able to jump into these different like categories, or what's that look like?
Yeah. So I guess right now it's my full-time thing. I was working as a software engineer, software automation engineer up until summer of 2022, and I got laid off from my job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you got laid off." I'm like, "Oh, it's been great." I mean, like, I don't make very much money now, but it has allowed me the flexibility to go out and try all of these things and, kind of just do whatever I want. I'm like, I'm scraping by. I'm not asking my parents for money. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So I work
So were you
currently as a freelance photographer and content creator.
Okay.
Cool.
Very
Very
cool.
cool.
Is it for your own platforms only, or are you doing for other people, like contracted, or how does that work? Because we get a lot of questions about that. People want to like become, content creators in the outdoor industry, but there's 1,000 ways to do
Yeah.
it.
So I primarily do it on my own platforms.
Okay.
Yeah, or like I think the big thing is like brands will reach out to me and they'll be like, "Hey, we have like this thing we're launching, or we want to like tell this story. Like, can you help us?"
Love that. Love it.
Did you launch your business like while you still had like a 9 to 5, or was that like in it? Oh, you did.
Yeah.
So how did you go at it with that intention of like, hey, maybe one day I'll just kind of drop this, maybe one day I'll get fired, and then like and then lose this job, and then, or like what was the intention always to like break free to making this like full time, or was it more just kind of like a hobby side hustle sort of thing?
It was definitely a hobby side hustle type of thing. Originally, when I started a blog a little bit over 10 years ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is always going to be for fun, and I'm never going to monetize because it will make it less fun." And then over the years, like things changed, like media landscape changed, and I ended up starting to monetize, and it was just like nice to have like extra money coming in.
Yeah.
And then I think around 2018, 2019 was when I just ended up starting to make like a significant amount of money from it. And luckily, like I was working a fully remote job by mid 2019 where I could kind of balance the two things where I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on the road, so I can go do all these other things and like still like, get my side hustle stuff done and work done." And I went back and forth. I was like, I don't know if I want to do content stuff full time because it is a lot of work. I'm sure, as you both know, like with like, the podcast and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so really just went back and forth. And finally, like when I got laid off, I was just like, I will try this thing, I guess, and see where it goes. And if it doesn't go well, I can always go back and get a real job. And I still like waffle back and forth because I think people really poop on the 9 to 5, but there is something to be said for having stability and healthcare, and you're like, I have a regular paycheck, and I know like I'm off on the weekends, and this is my schedule, and I have like X amount of time to do like the things that I want to do. I definitely love the flexibility of freelancing, but I'm always just like, oh God, like when am I getting paid next? Like, where's my next paycheck coming from? Like, I have to go pitch. And so you never really turn it off, because at least if you have a 9 to 5, you can go home, turn off your computer, whatever, and just say like, I don't have to deal with this until tomorrow.
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said about that. We've been freelance for years now, but I look at people who have like a corporate 9 to 5 job, and I look at them and wonder, like, what's it like to have paid vacation days where nobody's going to bother you and you're still getting paid to go on vacation?
Or like it's after 5 o'clock and they're like, I'm not going to answer this email. I'm like, how dare you? Like,
it's so hard to turn it off.
Yeah. And I have friends, they're like, oh, I don't open my email until like I only look at my email when I'm at work. I'm like, well, what if like I emailed you like at night because there's like I don't know, like for whatever reason, they're like, well, I won't
Yeah.
see it until
Yeah.
tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boundaries. It's hard to find those boundaries
It
when you're
is.
self-employed. It's
Oh,
so hard.
It is.
But
It is. And
the flexibility, it makes it worth it.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, and but it is funny to work with, like, from a content creator standpoint, to work with brands who have those 9 to 5 settings. Like you're working with somebody that represents them, and then you're ready to go. Like that is always the story of us, that we're like, hey, we signed everything, let's go, let's make it tomorrow, we'll publish it tomorrow, like it's gonna be great. And then like, oh no, it's gonna take us at least 5 weeks to go through everything. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
it's just slow.
Yeah,
turn.
you're like, oh, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
contracts, and then you're like, okay, this is ready.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it doesn't fit into our content calendar, or like the story, or we need to go through like 10 layers of approval. And I'm like, but I thought, like, as an outdoor brand, you're supposed to be like chill and fun.
Right?
but it's still like, like
You're
a
not
9
fun,
to
you're
5.
corporate.
Yeah, 9 to 5, like corporate
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all the same.
Oh, do you have a question?
I was just going to ask her. So you're, correct me if I'm wrong, are you Vietnamese American?
I am Vietnamese American.
Okay. I've seen you talk some about being like diversifying the outdoor industry. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think you said something along the lines of like, there weren't a lot of people who looked like you in the outdoor industry when you started, or you wanted to make a bigger impact in that area. Is that something that you're passionate about, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it is, because I know, like, going into a lot of spaces in the outdoors, I feel very intimidated because I'm like, nobody looks like me. Like, even, like, for example, even yesterday, I was looking through some of, like, my photos with my friends on, like, cycling stuff, and I'm like, oh, like, everyone in this is still very white. Like, in our kind of, like, a little immediate group of people riding, it was just me and one other person who were not white. And it just feels very intimidating, like you're not welcome in the space. Like in cycling, like everything's expensive. I just got a new bike, and it's technically not mine. It's on indefinite loan from Squid Bikes, and I'm super grateful for them for putting it together for me, because my first bike is, I mean, it's a decent bike. It's just very heavy, and I've kind of outgrown it. But when I bought this bike, it was, I think, $1,500. And I was like, this is a very expensive bike. And I started looking at other bikes, and I'm like, oh, no. My $1,500 expensive bike is actually cheap. And
yes.
and and just like thinking about that is just like, whoa. So like my new bike, the wheels on it are already like $1,000. And I'm like, the wheels on this bike cost almost as much as my old bike. Like, what the heck? So just like all of these things kind of like compounded, like spandex, people in spandex and jerseys and stuff, they look really intimidating. Like they might not be fast, but they still look fast. And when you are first starting out, you're just like, oh, like I don't fit in here. And jerseys can be expensive. Like really nice bibs start at like $150. So like I keep trying all these new things and finding myself in these spaces where there aren't a lot of people who look like me. And like I want to just make the outdoors a place where like I want to be like that person where someone who's like an Asian woman sees like my stuff on Instagram and is like, oh, like this actually looks really cool, and if Paulina's doing it, I think I can do it too.
Very good. That's really cool. It is. It's an intimidating place. I mean, obviously we're both white, so we can't speak to that side, but at least the financial side of it and being intimidating and having that barrier of, trying to get into it, and you want to try it, but you just maybe not have the money. Do you have any advice for somebody? I mean, I guess there's just two different angles. Maybe they want to get into a sport, but they're looking at that price tag that comes with it, or maybe they're another minority and they want to get into the outdoor industry. What would you say to those kind of people who just are a little intimidated by the obstacles that are presented to them?
The best thing to do is to try to find someone in your community who can help open those doors for you. And then I guess like I'm defining community like very broadly, but like that could be people you follow and admire on Instagram. I have gotten messages from people who are just like, hey, like, how did you get into this? Or like, can you help me, like, point me in the right direction for like buying a gravel bike or something like that. And it also, again, like one of those things that takes a lot of courage, and you have to like, kind of put yourself out there, and there's like a good chance people will say no, but generally I find that people are very or welcoming, or they kind of want to help, especially in like affinity groups. They're like, oh yeah, like there's like enough space for all of us here, and like when you lift up one person, you kind of like lift up everyone else too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that it kind of keeps coming back to like just be bold enough to reach out and ask somebody, ask for help. And you may get turned down, but that's just part of the process. But I think that's true in a lot of things in life. But yeah, the outdoor industry, just being curious and saying, hey, I like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can I come along? I think it's such simple advice, but it's so good.
Yeah,
because it isn't.
And when she's right, she's like, it's a brave ask, because I mean, for a lot of times, even us, like we don't want to ask or look stupid or
inconvenience them,
inconvenience them or anything like that. And it's actually really admirable that you do that, that you feel I don't know if you feel comfortable all the time doing that, or you've grown like so much. You're like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I'm sure it takes, asking one time and more and more and more. But are you a introvert or an extrovert?
Definitely very introverted.
Really?
Like,
okay.
Yeah, like an outgoing introvert. I think it really depends on like the situation I am in. But most times I'm just like, oh God, like what am I doing here? Why did I leave my house? It takes me forever to leave the house. So it does like take a lot for me to try to like put myself out there. But at the same time, I think like over the years, I've just really grown to realize that you have to shoot your shot for whatever it is. Because if you don't, you're like, most people aren't going to hand things to you on a platter, and you have to like go out and get them. And take those steps. So for me, it's been a lot of just being like, okay, you can do this, like hyping myself up to, either send an email or, get on the bike and show up or ask for help. And one thing I've really noticed is that, people sometimes don't know how to help you. Like they're not going to reach out first and say like, hey, like, let me do this thing for you. But if you reach out to them and you're like, hey, like I need this thing, or like, for example, like going through my breakup, I reached out to kind of like my cycling friends and, other people in my community to say like, hey, I'm going through this hard thing with a long-term partner, and I'm scared that I will just retreat inside my house and you're never going to see me again, and I will just like be on the floor for the next 5 years. So if you don't hear from me, or, if you have cool stuff going on, will you please reach out and let me know? So that way I can just get out of my head. And everyone's just like, oh, like, we didn't know you were going through this thing. This is absolutely something we can do, and we're happy to help. And like invite you out on things, and or like just check up on you.
It's so hard because I'm an introvert too, and I always come back to like, I don't want to inconvenience them, but you have to ask for things sometimes because people don't know what you're going through or what you want until you ask, and half the time they're like, yeah, you can come along. The thoughts never cross their mind because they're just busy living their own life, and that's a good reminder of just go ask. What's the worst that can happen? They're gonna say no. Nobody likes rejection, but it's part of life.
Yeah.
So
that's.
Yeah,
I guess that is the question to ask. What's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, worst thing they come
then
across the
I
table
start
and like
spiraling.
punch you.
I start spiraling. I'm like, what is the worst that could happen? Like they're gonna think I don't know.
Yeah,
like you start getting in your head of like, oh, it could spiral.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like if they think you're dumb or whatever, like a loser for asking these questions and for like trying to put yourself out there, like that's not on you. That's on them, and you don't really want to be friends with that person anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great reminder.
You're absolutely right. And
now I'm gonna go message everyone. Can we hang out?
Yeah.
Not really.
I remember. So we actually met. Like we cycled quite a bit, and we cycled across America, like road cycled, and like in that like adventure, like it sounds so epic and awesome, and like you tell like normal people who don't cycle, you're like, oh, and they're like, wow, you did something really cool. But I remember going to a bike shop after we completed that tour, and I'm like, hey, I rode across the country, and the guy at the bike shop was like, was it supported or self-supported? And he was asking basically, did you have a car that carried all your things with for you, or did you carry every item on your bike? And I said, oh, it was supported. And he's like, big deal. Like, who cares? And I just remember being so like deflated after that. I'm like, I am a fraud. I didn't do anything cool. Like, it wasn't good. But I don't shop at that bike shop anymore.
Yeah,
so
that's
all that
not
to say,
welcoming at all.
Yeah.
It's just like who cares? Like, if it was supported or not? Like, your legs still rode all of those miles. Like, wow, you didn't have an extra 30 pounds on your bike. You know, like, okay.
Yeah, it's intimidating though.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody's opinion and viewpoint on it is very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just gotta find people who are at the same level as you too.
Yeah. So when you're going through all your, like, I don't want to call them hobbies, but like they're definitely things that you like, you know, whether it's hiking or cycling or whatever. Like, you're picking up these different outdoor activities. Like, is it just because you are a person that you're interested, like you're just kind of interested in these different things, or is there a rhyme or a reason to why you do what you do?
I think it's just because it's just like stuff that looks cool. Hiking is one of those things where I'm like, that's pretty easy. Like, you know, you put on shoes and you walk out your door, or you like walk out of your car.
Yeah.
Climbing for me, I don't know. I went to a climbing gym a few times and it was just fun. Fun-ish. It really makes you think creatively about like how to move your body on rock, because everyone does it so differently and everyone's bodies are so different that you kind of just have to find your own solution. And for me, like cycling, I've always commuted by bike. I didn't have a car until 2019. Wow. So I was commuting to like work by bike, like living in San Francisco or living in the Bay Area, and moving out to Sacramento. There's like a really cool bike trail that runs like 20-30 miles from here to like another city like east of here, and I would ride my little crappy commuter bike out there, and eventually I was like, oh, like maybe like having a nicer bike will help. But I don't know. It's just like a weird thing where I'm like, oh, like this looks cool and I want to try it.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Just go with whatever looks interesting. And,
Yeah.
and I like you mentioned earlier about, you know, try it out, go for a class. That way you're not buying all the gear and being stuck with it if you really end up hating it. I think there have been things that we've tried and I thought I was going to love it, and I just did not like it, and I'm glad I didn't spend thousands of dollars of gear on it.
Well, we have people. We used to do van life quite a bit. Like, we had 2 vans and whatever, and we had a lot of people reach out to us about how, you know, they wanted to buy a van and wanted to start traveling that way, and we immediately would tell them, please don't buy a van unless you like rent one first, or at least try it out, because like, do not put yourself in like $40,000 of debt for just the vehicle or whatever. It's more than that now. But like,
the Sprinter's like 80 grand. Like, people are like, we want Sprinter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive. And we have seen plenty of people who do the same thing where they'll buy it and then like 3 months in they're like, I hate this, and then they just like sell it immediately. So I like, just try it out. You may not like it. It's not for everyone. That's truth, everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Good little tidbits here.
Yeah.
Pauline, this is so good.
Yeah, I did. I actually kind of like, to that effect, I did some work with a camper van company at the end of last year. And like, a van is always something I've wanted to work on, or like not work on, but a van is something like I want to like work towards eventually, like after some other adult things that I need to do. But and like one of the talking points of the camper van company was like them saying like, hey, like put your own spin on it. And so I asked them, I'm like, oh, is this a thing where you can like rent and like try before you buy? And they were like, absolutely. Like, we love the idea of people renting vans on our platform to get an idea of like what they want in a van or what they don't want. And so for this project, they gave me like a super fully like decked out van. It was like super long, like extended cab. It had I think a queen or king size bed in the back. It had a bathroom. It had a shower, like lots of counter space. It was massive, like definitely too much van for 1 or 2 people, but good for a family. And it was just nice to be able to look at it and say like, oh, you know, these are, you know, like I actually, you know, having a toilet in a van is kind of nice, but also a little bit unnecessary. But if like space were not an issue, I would maybe have one because it's just really nice to not have to get out of the car and yeah, just be able to see like the different like how people decide to lay things out and like why they made the choices they did to kind of help inform your decisions when you're deciding to buy a new van.
Yeah, I could see you doing van life. I could.
Oh
see
yeah,
it seems like you're
100%.
I don't know.
right in that.
I don't think
that
I would
demographic.
do full-time van life because I love having a house and like space and then my cats. But
Yes.
definitely like a multi like a couple weeks on the road or a weekend video type of thing.
100%.
Especially in the
Yeah.
winter.
You're in the perfect place.
Yeah, especially in the winter. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm too old. I mean, I sleep in my Outback now, but even then I'm like, oh, I wish I had more space. I wish I could just like cook inside when it's really cold and windy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like,
It does spoil you. I mean, we'll still tent camp, but yeah, the van definitely
Oh yeah.
spoiled us.
Well, I mean, we definitely judge people who tent camp. We'll roll
No,
into
we
the
do
campground.
not.
We're just like, yeah, look at those people.
No, we definitely don't. Oh man. All right. So where should we go from here?
Well, so for the future, 2024, are there any like projects, destinations, any cool things that you're like excited about doing, like training for? What's the rest of the year look like for you?
honestly, everything is still kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's been a year where I'm just like, I have no idea what is happening or what's going on, and I think I'm just gonna try to roll with the flow, or go with the flow.
Good for you.
Just because I'm always so used to like looking at my calendar and everything's like planned out through the end of the year, and like it's nice, but also doesn't leave much room for flexibility. Yeah, so projects still big question mark. I need to get my life together in that sense. Like kind of trips. I don't know, like all the cycling has been really great. So like lots of cycling focused stuff. I want to. I'm like 98% sure I'm heading to Japan in October to do a bike race.
No,
What?
really?
That's so cool.
I'm like, ooh,
That's
I need to pitch
dream.
people now. But yeah, so
Yeah.
You get it. Oh my gosh, that will be amazing. You said October? I bet that'd
Yes,
be
it'll be like
beautiful there.
fall.
We can make that work.
Yeah, you should
That would
get
be
gravel bikes so we can all go. It'll be really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the race is called Grinduro, and the person I'm going with did Grinduro up in California several years ago, and he was just like, oh, it was really fun. It's like a 3-day event that's like half party, half bike race, and just like really fun, and you get to camp. So we're trying to figure out logistics for that now, and like flying with bikes like internationally, and like how we're gonna get around Japan, because Japan's super great with like, you know, like the high speed like trains, the Shinkansens and stuff. But with a bike, it's a little bit harder. And I am also a chronic overpacker because I'm like, what if I need this? Like, what if like this very specific scenario happens and I like need this other thing?
Yep.
So yeah, so we're like, well, with, you know, space constraints, maybe we'll just rent a van, like a camper van with a bike rack, and drive around for a little bit, and then we save money on hotels and things. So yeah, so that's kind of like the big trip this year. And I don't know, last year I spent most of the summer out of the country and like just gone, so I'm excited to do things at home and like go backpacking and you know, like hang out in fire lookouts. And then there is another really cool bike race I'm working towards in May called Stettin's Pay Dirt, and it's just outside of Carson City, Nevada. So not super far from here. And my friends all say that it's the most beautiful, well, like one of the most beautiful races that they've ever done, and just super fun. And like challenging, but not too challenging. So they convinced me to sign up for that, and it should be really fun. But yeah, you should totally get gravel bikes. It's just different.
We would love to. It's been on our list. It's just that truthfully, it's like that expense. Like we want to make sure we're in a place we can use them all the time if we're going to pay the price for them. But I think it's going to happen soon because like we've been eyeing it for a few years now. It's been on our wish list.
I think the used
it'll happen.
I think the used bike market right now is also very good for people who want to buy bikes.
That's good to know. I haven't let myself look, but I might go look
actually
now.
Really good to know.
Yeah, that's too tempting.
That is really.
We'll be home in a few weeks, and we're even going to Oregon in a few weeks.
Yeah.
I'm like, what if we got some we could use in Oregon in May?
Yeah.
That'd be so fun.
Oh, that is kind of tempting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This just became a really expensive conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, when I was making the decision to buy a gravel bike, I was just like, well, like I don't think I'll use it that much, and I already have a bike, and it was funny enough. It was actually on a photo shoot, and we were like doing bike related things, and we were just like in this bike shop they wanted to showcase, and I walked in and I saw like a really fun like turquoise colored bike. And I'm like, oh, this bike is really pretty, and the shop owner was like, oh, it's in your size. Like, do you want to take it for a ride? I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And I rode it around, and I was just like, this is great. Like a bike that fits me, and it's like really pretty, and it's on sale. But like, I was just like, I don't know. I already have a bike. And everyone that we were with just said, if you have a bike you love, you are going to want to ride it all the time. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll like give it a shot. Like this project will pay for this bike, and like it's around Christmas, and my ex's dad was like, I'll give you some money for it, and my ex was like, I'll drive it back to California for you. I'm like, fine, I'll just buy this dumb bike, and then now here I am. Here I am. I have.
Twist my arm. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I went from having 2 bikes at this time last year to now having 4 bikes.
Oh no!
Wow! Oh wow! So you're all in. All right, cool.
They take up a lot of space.
Yeah,
too.
they do.
When we lived in a little apartment in Seattle, we had 4 bikes in that apartment, and it was just like it was our wall art. We just had them like lined up against the wall. It was just Just made it part of it.
I'm glad my ex moved out, so I have room for my bikes now.
There's a bright side to it. That's the way to look at it. So fun. Okay, well, I think we're gonna go look for bikes now.
So,
in all seriousness,
if you could say one last thing, if somebody's listening right now, and whether it is about cycling or hiking or whatever, because I feel like that's kind of the nature of this conversation, which I love, is that you have all these different interests, and that you have just found a way to like get involved or figure it out. Like, what would you say to them if they're at the very beginning? They've just have the thought of like, hey, I want to try this, whatever it may be. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say you should try it. You should, like work up the courage and do what you need to do to take that first step and put yourself out there, whatever that looks like for you. Because the worst thing that is going to happen is you don't like it, or someone rejects your advances. That sounds weird. So they say no. Like
we know where you're going. Yes.
Shut it down.
Yeah, but you could spend all the time like telling yourself that things aren't going to work out, and like shutting it down before you even get started. But like, why not try to take that first step and go out there and get what you want? Because you could be really pleasantly surprised, and you could find like just new hobbies, new friends, new joy. Like there's, you never know unless you take that first step.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go reach out to lots of people, go bike shopping.
Yeah.
Really?
And we'll see you in Japan very soon.
You'll see me in Japan, and then after Japan, you'll be coming down to California, and we'll you can do your first cyclocross race with me.
That's right.
Yes, let's do it. I've got it. Every time we have a podcast interview, like I have a new passion. Like I don't know. Every single person we talk to, I'm like, I want to do that. So like, I really got to rein it in, because every week it's just something new I want to try.
Yeah, but like
this is dangerous and inexpensive.
But also the flexibility of being a freelancer. You can maybe try all these things.
You can.
It's true.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true. It's very true.
Paulina, where can people find you and follow along your adventures?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is very basic, just my first and last name, Paulina Dao. And then I also talk about a lot of my adventures on my blog and gear reviews. If you ever have questions about stuff, feel free to head to littlegrunts.com, shoot me a DM, shoot me an email. I try to be responsive.
Paulina, thank you so much for being here. We're going to link everything down below so people can find you, follow along, and I hope we see you out there sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for being
Yeah,
here.
you're always welcome to come hang out, ride bikes, go hiking, whatever. Doors open.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Paulina. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for listening to What No One Tells You with Chris and Sarah. If you have a comment or question that you want answered on the air, be sure to send us a message to hello@chrisandsarah.com, or you can call or text our phone number at 423-825-9572. Thanks for listening.